catastrophe in terms of its goal, which was to redistribute and give opportunity and create a middle class and all of that. And should we have asked more questions? Should we have pushed the Russian government then for more, checks and balances on that system? Maybe, since we were supporting it. But again, as I said, this same strategy had been used in smaller countries like Poland, like the Czech Republic, and it had worked relatively well in terms of creating a middle class and giving people a stake as the country privatized. And in Russia, as you say, a few people got very rich and a lot of people didn't. In the Yeltsin campaign of '96, it's not too dissimilar to what you see in other democracies, in the sense that there weren't good options, right? It was Yeltsin on the one hand or Zelensky on the other hand. But I think what's equally interesting, Misha, if I may, is what happened when Putin comes to power. Those first 5-10 years of Putinism, whether you count it from when he was prime minister or from when he becomes president, where he starts systematically ripping up the foundations of an open system, right? He goes after the press, TV first, and then the newspapers, and then radio. He doesn't allow those business people who had gotten rich to participate in politics. This is when he goes after Khodorkovsky and Gusinsky, et cetera, because they dared to challenge in the parliament his idea of reestablishing state control. And the security state reemerges, and he starts reconsidering a lot of cooperation programs. I remember serving in the Bush 41 administration with people who I respected a lot, who said, it's not America's business what's happening inside Russia. It only matters to us how we are cooperating on the international stage, and that they, have brought their army home from Eastern Europe, that we're working on issues like Iran together, these kinds of things, that they're no longer pressuring their neighbors. But I think it did matter in terms of Russia's future, what was happening inside, that the shoots of democracy and of openness and pluralism and free press and free speech were babies. They were 10 years old in Russia or less. And he was able, within 5 years, to roll so much of that back and to establish that state control system, which allowed him to block out any voices who wanted that democratic Russia, and that just got worse and worse. And had we raised more questions then, had we made our cooperation more conditional on Russia being a real democracy, staying a real democracy, might it have ended up differently for Russians? I don't know.
It's a very interesting approach that you mentioned from the Bush administration. I've heard several times from different Russian officials that they have some kind of theory that the real, or at least in the foreign policy, the real two-party system in America is the party of Kissinger and party of Brzezinski. And there are two very different approaches to the foreign policy and specifically to Russia. And they have always preferred dealing with Republicans, Kissinger party, because they are pragmatic, they do not pretend to be saints, they do not lecture us on the human rights, and so it's easier to deal with that approach. And it's much harder with Brzezinski's party, because they according to Russian officials, that's very hypocritical approach, and they are always trying to impose some kind of values. Russian officials obviously believe that Americans do not believe in those values, although they're trying to impose those values on Russians. Is there some part of, is it in any way correct that there are such two schools, two ideologies in American foreign policy?
It's too simplistic,
Yeah.
for sure. There are plenty of Republicans, including many that I've worked for, who are freedom Republicans and who believe that it matters to us how the countries that we work with are governed. And there are plenty of Democrats who are just transactional. So I think it's too simplistic to ascribe it to the two parties. I do think, though, that when the United States works with countries around the world, there's a difference in the way you can work with fellow democracies, the way you can work with countries that are open, countries where the people regularly get a real choice at the ballot box, not a fake choice, where the press plays the role of keeping politicians and the system honest, where business is truly free and open and competitive. Those kinds of countries are easier for us to ally with. We can expect that those checks and balances in the system are going to ensure that when we work together, they're going to stay generally in favor of protecting the same things internationally, right? An open trade system, an open political system, equal rights for all human beings, regardless of where they are and regardless of their color or nationality or religion or any of those things.